So, good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for coming on this very busy moment of the year. It's the opening of it's the first week of academic year, so it's a bit unfortunate, but we are really very happy finally to have Ayelet Gundar-Goshen here in Leuven. We already invited her at the occasion of the publication of the translation in 2020 of Leuven, but then the pandemic came in between and it was not made possible. So now we had to wait the publication of the new German translation of her latest novel, Waar de Wolf loert, also with the editor Cosset. And before starting our conversation, I would like to, and I'm very happy that he could come and that he wanted to come and be present here in Leuven. I will ask the editor of Cosset that you might know because he published a book, I think it was in 2016, what was it, the Gute Nacht, Freunde, which was a selection of German authors that I think now are published in Cosset and that you were directing. And he will say some few introductory words in order to introduce also Ayelet and in order to introduce the series, I think, of Cosset. So I leave you the floor.
Yeah. Hello, welcome everybody. It was indeed when Germany was the country, the guest of honor in the Netherlands, then my co-publisher Eva Cosset asked me to write something, because I'm of half Italian, half German origin, to write something about German books for this special moment. But after 3 weeks, it became a whole book, and therefore the subject was how can you make an image of a whole century through novels? And the novels should be published in German. So it started with Thomas Mann, Dr. Faustus, and it ended with some contemporary novel. And the question was always, what do we learn about society and history through these novels? But that's not the subject of today. And I'm very happy that Ayelet is here and is now doing a little Dutch language tour. And she will be on Saturday in Utrecht, because there's also a big literary festival. I can shortly introduce her. Ayelet Gundar-Goshen was born in '82. She made a master degree in psychology in Tel Aviv, but worked always as a journalist and a news editor. And she always studied screenplay and began from early on writing screenplays for television and for film. And I think you also made a name with that, because in that field you are also a very well-respected and wanted person. But she is also a great novelist, and her first book, which then was, the English edition was published at Pushkin Press in 2015. When did One Night Markovich was published in Israel first? When? In which year?
2012.
2012. It's for me not. I'm not amazed that this book and all the following books made their way out into the world, because you got quite some translations. And for your last novel, for the first time, the original, if you want, original publisher was a publishing house, Kain und Aber, in Switzerland, in Zurich. Maybe we can talk later about this, how this comes. In your novels, I always found a very intriguing subject, and that is how to deal with lying, with betrayal, with saying half the truth, with being silent about some truths, and so on. And my question is, how did you come across? Of course, we just heard that you studied psychology, but that doesn't mean exactly that this is a subject for a writer. How did you come across, how did you get interested in this very specific subject of lying, betrayal, and so on?
So first I will say shalom, and that I'm happy to be here. I think from a very young age, I remember the moment I realized that you can use words not just to communicate with other people, but you can also use words to hide yourself from other people. Because I think when you look at a little child, you see the first phase that everybody celebrates is the first word, right? The first time a child says mama or papa, then everybody text each other and call each other and celebrate it. Because this word indicates something in reality. And I was very curious about the first time a child would choose to say a word that does not indicate anything in reality, but creates not a bridge between the child and the other person, but a veil between the child and the other person. So when I wrote this one, when I wrote Liar, I really started to go to people and ask them if they can recall their first lie. So this is something I'm asking you right now. I don't know how many of you can remember your first lie as kids or a lie as teenager, but I was really fascinated by that. I was a terrible guest for dinner at that period, because I would sit down and I would start hassling people and asking them if they remember their childhood lies.
Do you remember it?
Yes, definitely.
And will you tell us what it was?
I can lie and say that I will, but I'm not giving you the real first childhood lie. I once read, it was interesting. Do you know the Confessions by Augustinus?
Yes.
I once read a very interesting article about it, saying how he confesses that he stole a pear from the pears tree. And the article was by a psychologist who said, there's no way that the biggest sin that this boy ever committed was stealing a pear from a pears tree. He gave this one so that he won't have to give the serious ones away. Like a lizard, that you know the lizards, that when you catch them, they let you have the tail, but then the body of the lizard can escape. They sacrifice the tail so that they can escape without it.
Yes.
So I think in a way, when you share one of your childhood lies, usually it's like the lizard's tail. You share something that you're willing to put in public, because there's no way that this is the ultimate childhood lie. But I do remember I lived in a very boring suburb of Tel Aviv, and most of the kids had a Holocaust survivor in their family. It was Ashkenazi kids from European origin, so most of them had a Holocaust survivor in their family, and each one of them would bring them to school on the Holocaust Memorial Day to share their testimony. And all the kids would listen to the testimony, and the teacher would listen to the testimony. And one day, and I didn't have a first family member who was a Holocaust survivor. And one day I said that I do have one. And I said that my grandmother was able to escape Auschwitz and to kill 2 Nazi soldiers on the way. And I was very much admired by the other kids, because their grandparents, some of them survived Auschwitz, but they didn't kill any Nazis during the way. And for about a day it worked. And then they wanted me to bring her to class to tell her testimony.
And then you said she's unfortunately ill.
She's ill. No, I had to. It was a very little neighborhood, and I had to tell her I had to confess. And I told her what I did, and she was very, very, very angry at me. It was the only time in my life that she slapped me. Say slapped.
Yeah.
But she was very angry, but she was also very generous, because she said something like, you can tell stories, but you have to differentiate the truth. Like when you tell a story, and we all know it's a story, and when you really tell something and we don't know if it's a story or not, and then you're betraying people's trust.
But this opens a very difficult, a more philosophical question, because you can tell stories and everything is invented, but it has a nucleus of real truth that is maybe more real than all the facts together. As an example, you maybe have read from Thomas Mann, the Buddenbrooks. And he writes about someone who buys grain and sells it before it is harvested. And so he invests a lot, but in the end, the whole business collapses. And Thomas Mann made very good research of this whole development. It was the beginning of dealing with corn and grain at the Börs. And he did it so nicely, described so nicely how the Buddenbrooks lived. So there in Lübeck is a museum of the Buddenbrooks. How the table was, how the living room was. It was all invented by Thomas Mann. But they thought it is so real and so convincing, so that they made a real museum about an invented interior of a novel. And if you look at it, you get the idea, if you have grandma and grandpa of this time, indeed, there is this clock, there is this cupboard. It's the same way of furnishing a living room. So in the end, an invention can also be very, very real. But you are, this is more a question, you are writing more about the hidden lies and the hidden betrayals that people do because of what? Did you find out what is the major reason why they do? Is there something in common? Is that to make impression? Is that to escape something? What do you think?
I'll first say something about your first comment about how sometimes something which is fictional can be more real to us than real life. And I think we all experience this feeling that you have a novel and you sometimes care more for a character in the novel than you care about somebody who's sitting next to you in class, though this person is real and this person is imagination, but you identify with him more. I sometimes find myself crying in films for people I never met, people who don't really exist, but I cry for them more than I cry for my neighbor or for my sister, because sometimes in this fictional creation, you find something which is like a hook into your soul. Or also, I'm a psychologist, and quite often people tell me dreams in therapy, which is interesting. You come to a therapist, and instead of telling him what really happened, you prefer to talk about something that did not really happen, about something you dreamed about. And this is not a waste of time, because both the therapist and the patient believe that sometimes what we dream about reveals more about our inner truth than what actually happened in the everyday chronology.
And sometimes we really believe that what we dreamt or what we wished really happens. Think about telling one episode of your life 7 times. It changes from time to time. If I would tell, being a great Beatles fan, that once I shook hands with John Lennon, after the 12th time I think I start to believe it. And Milan Kundera once said, our biography is a collection of disparate little pieces. And the art is to bring them together so we get something, a whole, that makes sense. So in other words, like Max Frisch once said, everybody is inventing himself a biography where he thinks that this is his life, although maybe many details are invented. Did you make this experience in your work as psychiatrist too?
I think when you practice psychotherapy, there's some equivalent between this and narratology. Because I think sometimes people come to a therapist because they feel like they're not the main protagonist in their own life. Like the story is written by somebody else. Like the plot of my life is written by my parents, or the person I am is written by the external demands instead of myself. And I want to be the person writing, I want to be the narrator. And what kind of narrator am I going to be? Am I going to narrate my life with, the sarcastic tone, bringing others down, bringing myself down, and I'm going to narrate my life in a more psychotic tone, as if it's not just about what actually happens, it's about how you choose to tell the story, how much emphasis do you put on which one of the factors. And I find that quite often in psychotherapy, when there is a couple or a family or a mother, it can be very helpful to tell the person to try to narrate the stories from the eyes. Like if you had to write another chapter when the entire story will be written by the perspective of your mother or by the perspective of your partner. Mm-hmm. How just practicing your mind and thinking about it as a story that can be, how do you say, like when you do it with a cake, with dough? Mm-hmm. Like realizing that there are fingerprints all over this and that this is not an objective fact that we're all looking at, but that by talking about it, we shape it. Mm-hmm. I think this is something very meaningful in therapy and in life.
Then I have a recommendation for you. There is a British writer, she's now 98 or something, Jane Gardam, and she wrote a trilogy, and volume 1 is the story of happy marriage from the point of view from the woman. Part 2 is the same from the perspective of the husband. If you read these books, you think they lived light years apart on a different galaxy. The image they have from the other is so completely different than the self-image, amazing. But they are a happy couple and think they are understanding each other really well. So is this something that intrigues you while writing books, this difference in interpreting reality or making a story out of it in your mind?
I think from all the different lies that we have, perhaps the most interesting lies are the lies that we tell ourselves. Because we all talk about how the government is lying to the people and about how people lie at work, and we like to catch other people while they're lying. You have this pleasure, I think, whenever a politician or an actor or somebody famous is caught in a lie. I feel like there's this energy as if he did something. And I think we don't quite often ask ourselves, where are the points where we're lying to ourselves? And I think perhaps this is the most fundamental questions. Like, what is it that we choose not to see? Not just not to show others about ourselves, but not to see, not to look with really open eyes at ourselves, at what we really want to. That's why I like dreams, because they often reveal what you really want, what you're really scared of. I think just like asking people about their first lie, I found myself asking this too, like asking patients when they came to therapy, asking when they come, you call it intake. It's like the first session with a new patient. I found that not just asking about the chronology of the life experience, but also asking if you would lie about something in your life, what would you lie about? Mm-hmm. I think it's an excellent way of finding the most painful area in a man's soul is asking him what he would lie about. It's as if the lie is like a red flag telling us, here's the treasure, this is where the treasure lies. So sometimes I think that perhaps if we weren't so busy condemning liars and, hating liars and criticizing liars, we could learn quite a lot by looking at lies, at what made us lie, at what made others lie to us. And I come back to what you said earlier about why is it that most people lie, that when I ask people about their first lie, when I wrote The Liar and I made this research about it, most of the childhood memories that I got from people had something to do with the fear of loss of love. A parent that might discover something about me that I'm ashamed of. A friend that I really want to appreciate me that might discover something that I'm ashamed of. But this feeling of shame, the feeling that the truth in itself is not good enough to get me through the day. And I think it's fascinating because when you open the Bible, the Old Testimony, and you try to locate man's first lie, okay? If we look at the Bible as this sort of mythology or a psychology textbook, and we think about, okay, God creates man, he lets man the power of speak. How long is it from the moment that man was created until the moment that man uses his power of speech to say something which is not true? How many pages can I turn before I get to the first lie? And for me, it was fascinating because I thought it would be Cain and Abel, but it's not. It's way earlier. It's in the story of the Garden of Eden. It's actually God creates man, and 2 minutes after that, the first sentence that man tells to God, the first time they speak, there's a quote in the Bible, it's a lie. And if you think about the relationship between man and God as a father-son relationship, and you think God tells man, don't eat from the apple, you can eat from whatever you want in this garden, there's one thing I'm telling you not to do, don't eat the apple. And then what's the first thing that man goes and does? He goes for the apple, which is typical for father-son relationship. And he goes to the apple, and then God is looking for him, and he's asking him, where are you? And you can say that God lies first, because God knows very well where a man is hiding, right? This is God, he knows where he is. But he's asking this tricky question, and then man says, I'm hiding because I don't want to appear naked in front of you. And that's a clear lie. You're not hiding because you don't want to appear naked. You're hiding because you're scared, because you did the one thing you were supposed not to do. And I think this is so interesting that when you open the Bible and you say, this is the ultimate archetype of father-son relationship, and it doesn't end with a lie. It starts with a lie. It starts with the fear of the child that if the father would see him as he is, if he will be indeed naked in front of him, then he will be kicked out. And then he has to cover himself up with the words of the lie, like he uses the leaves of the fig.
But isn't there also another aspect of lying? You said out of pain, of shame. But can it be also, let's say, the wish for something, a positive utopia? I had to think when you asked what was my first lie, I remember. Then I said, I wanted, because of my Italian mother, I wanted to become a pope. But not because I really felt I had to be a holy person. But then I could preach to my 3 sisters and say what to do for me. So this was not out of shame or something, but there was a purpose, something where I could benefit from that. And this is, in my point of view, and it's also a subject in all your books, the research of what drives people to do this or that. Not that it happens, but why it happens. Where is the power that brings them to do this or that? Is this something you would say is an ever-going topic in your literature, this interest?
I think very much so. I think perhaps this is where it all starts from. I read about something that happened in the news, and I have this question of, but why? Why did this person do it? And from this question that I think we quite often have with the news, I think if you stick to that question and you take it and you start to be haunted by the question and you really care about why did this person do it, then maybe you have the beginning of a story. And I think this is something that you do in psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. Instead of judging people, you try to understand what motivated them. But also in The Liar and in Where the Wolf Lurks, because The Liar is based on a real story that happened in Israel, where a young woman, not a teenager like in the novel, but a young woman, accused a man who was a migrant from Sudan, accused him of sexually assaulting her. And it was a very high-profile case in Israel because of the discussion with the immigration, and the right wing tried to use it. It was a hot topic. And eventually, they managed to prove that the woman was lying and that the man did not sexually assault her. It wasn't possible with the layout of the place where it supposedly happened. And what was fascinating for me was the dramatic shift in the public opinion. A moment before, it was this whole right wing of they come here from Africa to rape our daughters and like really kill the man. One moment afterwards, it was this woman is a psychopath, she's a bitch, she's a monster, hang the woman. Mm-hmm. And I remember I thought, but this is too easy to say that one of them is a psychopath, one of them is a monster, and this is the one that we should hang. And I thought, what about this woman? I want to try to understand this woman. What if she's not a monster? What if she's not a psychopath? What if, under given circumstances, this woman could have been me? I mean, I lie quite too often. Could I get trapped in something like this? And I feel this was the moment that The Liar was born, because I was really walking the street asking myself this, what kind of person, try to understand the person, until a moment that I entered an ice cream shop under my studio in Tel Aviv. And it's an ice cream shop in Tel Aviv, and it was summer. It's really, really hot in Tel Aviv in the summer. And there are massive people. And it's not like here when everybody's queuing very quietly and politely in Tel Aviv. We push each other, and we were all on this one ice cream seller. And she had a name tag, but nobody talked to her. They just used the name tag to get her attention. Like they called the name tag out loud so that she will pay attention to you and not to the next customer. And I felt this is so violent. And I looked at her, and she looked like so completely unseen. And I thought, what if it would happen to this girl, that people would think that she was sexually assaulted? And all those people who don't care about her, who just humiliate her and run her over the way big cities run you over, all those people will automatically hug her and care for her and like her. And I thought, perhaps you don't have to be a psychopath in order to get yourself trapped in something like this. Perhaps you just need to be a human being. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what makes, for me, your novels so intriguing. That is just not this simple black and white. But there are so many different layers of light gray, of white, of light black, and so on. And I think this is, for a novelist, much more interesting. And maybe you can also tell how the story goes on in The Liar, because this is quite sophisticated.
So in The Liar, what I did was I took this case that really happened in Israel and that I heard about from my friend who was representing there, but I changed it. I didn't use a migrant and a fully grown woman. I used a teenage girl, the one who works in the ice cream shop. I took the girl from the ice cream shop. I gave her a name, Nofar. And Nofar in Hebrew has a meaning. It's a water lily. And the name, I felt, carries this obligation. Mm-hmm. I don't know, does Belgian names have meanings, most of the names? Sometimes, yes. In Israel, almost every name has a meaning. Like it always, if you do double click, there's like something that's anticipated inside the name. So if you call a girl a water lily, the meaning is not just that she's a water lily, that she's supposed to be as delicate as a water lily, as beautiful as a water lily, as blossoming as a water lily. If you call a boy Leon, Lavi, Lavi, the name of the boy in the novel Lavi is lion in Hebrew. And his father, his name is like a big lion, the name in Hebrew of the biggest lion. And the father gives his boy this name because he has this fantasy about what kind of child he's going to get. We choose the name when the baby is really small. It has nothing to do with the baby. It has to do with our ego and with what kind of object do I want to have. So he puts on this little baby the name lion, but then the baby grows up to be not a lion, but, food for lions. He's not an alpha male, he's a gamma. And the girl is giving the name water lily, but she doesn't blossom. Her sister blossoms, but she doesn't blossom. So they both go around the world carrying these heavy names on their shoulders. And then when a customer comes to the ice cream shop, he talks to her in such a humiliating way, which is also based on a true story that happened in Israel, when the owner of a big company came to a cafe and he didn't know that there were cameras. He wouldn't do it today, it was 10 years ago. He didn't know that he was cameraed. And he talked to the lady the way only company managers allow themselves to talk to a woman. She was a woman of color, and later on it was on the news, and everyone condemned him because it was racist and sexist and everything. And I thought, but what about all the cases that don't get photos? What about the cases that not in the news? So I took this story, and into the ice cream shop comes this ex-reality star, and he
pop singers or something, a television star, yeah.
And he comes to this girl and he starts humiliating her. And it's not sexual harassment, but he's breaking her soul to pieces with the power of his words, which is in Israel completely legal. Like if you touch somebody in his body, then you can get to prison. But if you smash somebody with your words, then you can go ahead with it. And she runs away crying. And then everyone come and they say, did he hurt you? And she's crying and she's sobbing and she says, yes. And they automatically assume that if she says that he hurt her, then he sexually harassed her. And then in a minute, she's transformed from this nobody into somebody. She becomes like a dark Cinderella because all of a sudden, everyone wants to hug her, everyone wants a piece of her, everyone wants to celebrate this girl power. And she's caught in her own words, and she's unable to break out of it. She's afraid that if she'll say something, then people will hate her and condemn her. She's afraid of Google, because today when you do something bad when you're 16, it haunts you for its eternity. Whenever they Google your name, years from now, they will see that you're the one who accused somebody and then came back from the accusal. And this boy, Lavi, the lion who is not a lion, is the only witness to this event. He's the only one who knows that it did not happen.
He sees it from third floor.
Yeah.
Looking down on the square.
Because he's a bit suicidal, so he's always looking down from the third floor. And he starts blackmailing her. He says that he will not reveal what happened, but he blackmails her in order not to reveal what happened.
Blackmails in the sense that he said, you could be nicer to me, because he's a lonely boy, as I remember it, wasn't it? Yeah. So he wants to benefit a bit from that.
Yeah.
And this makes the story, in my point of view, so intriguing that good literature, I would say, makes it difficult for us to condemn, to say good, bad, how to judge this, because you understand also the boy who is extremely lonely. The girl suddenly is in television and everybody loves her. And the pop singer, he gets in jail, but he has done nothing. He was just angry about this girl and followed her because he thought, he put some money on the table and thought, the girl has taken the money, without giving him ice cream. So he felt betrayed and ran after her. But that was not the story. The banknote still is living behind the encounter, and he didn't see it in the right way. But that makes this story so you have, in the end, only losers in the story. Or am I wrong?
I think when I wrote it, I didn't think of them as losers or winners. I thought of them as people trying to get through the day. And it's interesting that you're saying not like being judgmental about it, because when I wrote it, I felt quite judgmental about myself, because when I started writing this, I told you I had like ice cream next to my studio. And the reason I had a studio was that I just became a mother for the first time to a little girl. So I had to get out of the house and have a studio, otherwise I will never write. And I thought to myself, you're a mother of a baby girl and you're writing a story about a girl making false accusations. I mean, as a feminist, as somebody who wants to raise a baby girl in a place which is safer for women, this is the novel that you want to write right now, a novel that says that a woman can make up a sexual assault. After generations, whenever a woman said that she was sexually assaulted, nobody believed her. I don't know how it was here, but in Israel, for years, when a woman said that she was assaulted or harassed, people would say that she's making that up because she seeks attention. There was a phrase for that in Hebrew. I don't know if it's the same here, but in Israel, this was the atmosphere until Me Too.
Not in these days, I think. Now, if a woman says this, I think people will take it much more serious than 20 years ago.
20 or even 5? Is it something that happened here after Me Too, or was it like gradually over 20 years?
What would you say?
In Israel, we needed Me Too. Until Me Too,
Yeah.
until 5 years ago, the basic assumption would be that the woman is making it up because she seeks attention, and unless you really prove it otherwise, this would be the basic assumption. Me Too was a huge, huge revolution in that aspect. And I did find myself asking myself, I'm writing this novel, coming back home to my girl, and Me Too it didn't even start, but I kept having this thought about my girl that she was really, really small. And I thought, if she was a boy, then I would fear maybe that she will get into troubles and into a fight. But because this baby happens to be a girl, I already know for sure that somewhere along the way, some man is going to sexually harass her, because either in the army or in the university, but this is life. Somewhere along the way, this is going to happen. And I hated this thought that I know nothing about this baby yet. The one thing I do know is that because it's a baby girl and not a baby boy, this is going to happen. And then I thought, so why are you writing this novel right now? And I had this really judgmental voice inside myself asking, am I allowed, in a way, to write a novel about a woman making up a lie?
But why shouldn't you not be allowed? Don't you think a writer should be allowed to write everything about if he's trying to find out what are the motives of something?
I think so, and that's the reason why I kept on with it. I also felt in a way that not to write about something because someone might take it into the wrong direction is something very tricky, that I would cut half of the novels that I appreciate from my bookshelves if this would be the motivation. But I still felt like I have to struggle with this question before I could keep on writing it. And I did get, when the novel was out in Israel, one of the journalists, a male journalist, told me, didn't you want to wait 2 more years before you publish it? And I think that was the moment where I was absolutely sure about publishing it, because I thought this is so typical to have a male journalist telling me what a woman should or should not publish in this specific year. But it was a question. You sometimes ask yourself, what are people going to do with the novel? How are they going to use it?
Do you think, because you used this word now several times, that morality or morals are something important in your writing. Because you also could say, like Simenon once said, the major thing is to have empathy, the biggest possible empathy with your character, and you have to hope with the murderer that the murder succeeds.
As an author, definitely.
Although it's against all our moral parameters and categories, to hope with the murder that the murder succeeds. Or another wonderful story from the Italian writer Elio Vittorini, who writes that 3 children are left by their parents because Pa is going to Sicily, mother is following him, and then oil and all the food is up. And the girl, she's 14, sleeps with many, many soldiers from the garrison nearby, and the author makes us believe that after that she is a lilac like Maria, the mother of Jesus. Nothing harms her. It's again all idea of reality, but we believe it. A miracle, how this works. And I think this sort of seduction by words is also something very essential in literature, and therefore my question, do you feel moral questions are limiting your writing, or how do you handle this?
I think it's very important that morals, or I will say like my ideology, won't harm the novel and turn it into a manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a very political person. I talk quite a lot about politics in Israel and in life, but I think when you write a novel, it's not about making a propaganda. Because if I want to say something, if I want to say, I don't know, stop the occupation, I can say it in 3 words. Yeah. I don't need to write 300-page novel for that. And I hate it as a reader. When I open a novel and somewhere in the 3rd page, I feel like I know what this person is going to tell me and he's shouting in my ear while I'm reading. I hate this experience.
This is more North Korean literature.
I feel this way because I think literature is about asking questions. It's not about the exclamation marks, it's about the question marks. As you said, it's about trying to understand what motivates people. It's about empathy. It's about being able to really put yourself in the shoes of the other person, even if this other person is a murderer, even if this other person is doing something that you think is wrong. And if you don't do it because you're writing from the superego and you're not letting the id inside, then you're cutting out, half of what it means to be human. And then really it's not literature, it's propaganda.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, would you say a good novelist is more or less a researcher of the human soul, of the condition humaine, or however you will call it? Not judging, but trying to research what's going on with our dreams, our utopias, our nightmares, and so on and so on. Just to describe this every decade anew, what is haunting us, what gives us joy, and so on.
I think that's a good question. And I think I would be naive to say that you can be an objective researcher. If we look at my field at psychology, Freud really liked to think about himself as an objective scientist. But the way he looked at women's sexuality was obviously through his lens. And then somebody that came after Freud would look at the same topic from a different perspective and ask different questions and therefore get different answers because you phrase the question completely different. So I think if you look at authors like Michel Houellebecq, he will look at people as a researcher that examines insects, okay?
Yeah.
Another author will look at people, at the same person, but not as if he was examining an insect, but as if he was examining something of rare beauty. I mean, I think it depends on the way because we write the end of our research, right? You choose if you think that a man can get out of war whole, or if you think that a man can get out of war into pieces. You choose if you think by the end of the novel that people can change, or if you think that people are stuck in their own patterns. And this is your choice as an author, how much hope you leave for your characters.
This idea of researching, I learned as a young editor from no one less than Primo Levi, because I talked with him quite often, and I wanted to understand how it comes that the Nazis were able to talk about Jews as ants or flies or something you don't want to have in your house or in your country. And he said, my research in Is This a Man? Was what happens to someone who is imprisoned, who is nearly dying because of hunger, and steals from his fellow mate the last piece of bread the other one has hidden under his pillow. And then he said something that really hit me. He said, if they succeeded in bringing us back to our most basal instincts, eating to survive, then they are very close to their aim, because this reduction to the instincts takes away all ideas of morality, so there's only one reason: survive, survive, survive. And if you steal it, it's bad, but you are not able to think about that if you steal it, because the impetus of surviving and having something to eat is the strongest, and switches out all other moral categories. And he thought this way of researching, he thought, is the first of the greatest thing literature and art can do. So first do the research, judging is for later, or for the readers, or for whomever. And the next step you took from The Liar, I found this is really something to put on top. A mother who is asking, what is going on in my child, with my child? How much of his heart, soul, feelings, thoughts do I see, can I read? What does he or she hide from me? Was this something, because it's a tricky subject. Normally in our cliches we say parents love their children deeply and have to protect them, and so on and so on. And suddenly it's changed. A mother's looking, what is this boy hiding? Why doesn't he speak? Why is he so keeping me off his boundaries? Extremely interesting. How did you come to that?
So that's the new novel, which I just saw today for the first time in the Dutch translation, and I can't read one word of it. This, like The Liar, doesn't have a birthday. I don't know what day it was that I first heard about this story. This one has a birthday. Like, I know the day that this novel began in my head. Because in Israel, the school year starts at the 1st of September. I understand that here it starts today, or just the university? University.
Yeah.
So in Israel, the school for kids starts on the 1st of September. And I took, by then, my little girl, the one that was a baby in The Liar. By then, she was 4. And I took her for the first day at preschool. And when I entered the preschool, and I was holding her hand, I was feeling that my whole body is tense like this, and that I'm looking at the other kids, which are all, 4-year-old kids, like this size. I'm looking at them with the most suspicious eyes, like, which one of you nasty little girls is going to say something bad to my girl and make her cry? Which one of you boys is going to, I don't know, hold her hair or take a toy from her? Like really looking, you know, like which one of you is going to try to harm my little cub? And I then realized that all the other parents, in Israel we come with the kids. In the first day of preschool, the parents are there for the first half an hour. All the other parents have the same suspicious, almost paranoid looks. Like all the parents are looking at my girl and the other kids with the same eyes of where is the preschool bully and where is the preschool, I don't have another word. In Hebrew we say bitch, I'm afraid if it insults anyone here. Where is the terrible guy here that's going to ruin the life of my little baby? And then I came out after half an hour. I came out of the preschool because we have to leave them there, and then you come back an hour later to pick them up. And the other moms are going and they're a little bit crying, or they're holding the phone, you know, putting yourself in the phone so that you don't think or feel anything. I do it too often. And I realized that the entire street is full right now of parents with this one question of, where is the wolf that might harm my little child? And then I had this very disturbing question. I thought, but wait, what if my child is the wolf? What is my little girl, the sweet, innocent lamb that I just left in the preschool? What if right now she's saying something very, very nasty to another girl in order to feel good about herself? And this was a very disturbing thought. And I thought, it's amazing how all of us here are so worried that somebody else will harm our children, that the world might damage our babies, and none of us have this thought that our children might be the wolves that damage others. And then I came home to my partner, and I told him about this experience, and I asked him a question. I asked him, say that you had the ability to choose. Say theoretically, that's a theoretical question, that you could choose right now between having our little girl being bullied at the kindergarten and between she being the bully. Say you could choose. What would you rather have? Now, for me, this was a real question. I was really intrigued by his answer. It was a question, an open question. I didn't have an answer inside of me. But he looked at me with like this and said, and of course I prefer my child to be the bully than my child to be the victim. He didn't get the question at all. And I think maybe it's because he's an Israeli man and a macho, and I think maybe it's because his grandfather really wasn't a Holocaust survivor. He's a Holocaust survivor that lost his family, and that something of this trauma of the Holocaust made him be like, I will never be a victim again. But for him, it was not a question at all. And I said, really? Because I think if somebody would bully her, then maybe she's harmed, but at least we know that she's good from the inside, and we can talk to the other boy's parents. And he said, no, you don't understand. A bully, you can educate. If your child is an aggressor, you can educate him. It's okay. But if your child is a victim, then she will be a victim for life. I'm not sure if it's the truth, but he said it with deep. And that was the moment that this novel, that Where the Wolf Lurks, was born, because I was so upset with his answer. And I was so upset with this question of, is he right? Is it really either this way or that way? Either you raise, like you eat or you be eaten? Are these the only choices that a child has? And then I said, I want to write a novel about a mother that first discovers that her son was bullied at school and didn't tell her. Like, he didn't lie about it, but he omitted it. It's the most important thing in his life, and he didn't share it with his own mother. He was bullied at school for a long period of time, and he told her nothing about it. And she carried him inside her body. She knew everything about him, and she didn't know that. She didn't know that this is what's going on in school. And I knew that later on in the novel, I want the mother to start to suspect that her child, after being bullied, took revenge of the child that bullied him and might have been involved in the death of this child. So this mother becomes a sort of a police detective. You can say every mother is a little bit of a police detective. And the mystery that she is trying to solve is her own child. She looks at her child as if it was a riddle that she's trying to solve. This question of, as you said, who are you from the inside? Because it's tricky being a parent. You think you know everything. You know what your child wants in his sandwich, you know what music he likes and what music he hates, and you know how he takes off his shoes in the entrance of the house, and you know his smell, you know everything. But you know nothing. And this shift between everything and nothing was very interesting for me.
A fellow publisher said once to me as a joke, the family is the smallest criminal community.
Ayelet, now that we're talking about family, I actually have a question about that. You mentioned earlier that you lied about your grandmother being, if I understood well, was your grandmother whom you turned into a hero by saying that she killed Nazis and escaped the camp and so on. And this is something that I've noticed in your novels. It seems that you emphasize that the lie is much more capable than the truth of forging heroes. And for instance, in Liar, Nofar herself is turned into a hero by a lie. But even more interestingly, her grandfather, Elkanah, who is mentioned in textbooks that she reads at school, and who is taken to be a hero because during wartime he led his squad towards victory. Whereas in reality he's a coward, and nobody knows, because what actually happened was that he panicked and gave the order to retreat. But his second in command, who was an insubordinate officer, pushed through instead, and because everybody thought that the order was to attack, they followed the attack, and then ultimately the battle was won. And afterwards, the prime minister said to Elkanah that he's a hero. And then he said, I don't want to be a hero. And you write that the prime minister responded, well, it's not about what you want. We're not telling you what you have to want. We're telling you what you are. And then you write this interesting thing. You said, after all, not every lie is bad. Some lies build countries. And similarly, in Waking Lions also, the protagonist, Eitan, turns into a hero at the end because of a lie. What is remarkable is that in One Night Markovich, there is actually a battle that takes place in which Markovich is involved with his comrades, the gambler, the drinker, I think, and a man missing, a lame man who was very religious. And they all die an actual heroic death. And he's the only survivor, so he goes afterwards to visit the family members to tell them that their family member died a heroic death. But it doesn't produce any effect. It has barely any effect. In fact, one of the family members, the wife of the gambler, she chases the man away and she says to him, what does it matter whether he died a pig or a hero? He's dead anyway. And I found this remarkable that you emphasize that the lie can forge heroes, whereas, and at the same time you seem to emphasize the inability of truth to do the same. Could you comment on that?
I'll tell two things about it. One is, in Israel's history, you can actually see it very clearly, this need for heroes or the need for a myth. And perhaps it's in every nation's history, and this gap between what really happened and between what we need to happen in order to have a story that will glue us all together. Because I really think that sometimes a story, you know, every mythology, and every nation has a mythology. A mythology is, you know, it's a story, it's a lie that glues a nation together. The myth of the Volk, for instance. It's a very powerful story. In Israel, there was Trompeldor. Trompeldor, we all learned about him, was fighting the battle in before 48, when Israel was founded. And when he was wounded very heavily, he said, don't cry, it's okay. It is good to die for one's country. In Hebrew, tov lamut be'ad artzenu. It is good to die for one's country was a sentence that every child in Israel learns. It is good to die for one's country. Now, years later, there was this research saying that he didn't say it. There were two witnesses that said he didn't say it is good to die for one's country. He said a bad word, like a swirl in Russian. Okay, he said something like fuck it in Russian and died. He didn't say this sentence. And it echoed in the news for like 3 days, and it vanished. And another generation of kids is being grown up on it is good to die for one's country, because the truth is that nobody cares what Trumpeldor said before he died. Nobody cares if he said fuck it in Russian or if he said this sentence. The state of Israel feels that it is good to raise kids on the ethos of it is good to die for one's country, and they will use it with Trumpeldor or without him. And I think about what you said about the hero or a pig. My name is Ayelet, and I'm called after my uncle Eyal, who was killed by the Syrians in the 73 war. He was killed in the Golan Heights, and he was given the highest medal for bravery. And I grew up on the story of him being a hero, because the Syrians were coming, and he opened I don't know if you know about tanks, but if you open the window of a tank, you can see outside, but also missiles can get into the tank. So he opened the windows of the tank in order to be able to stop the Syrians from taking over. And that's how they died, and that's what he got the medal. Years after that, my mother came back shaken from meeting the family of the other guys that were in the tank. And they told her that for them, my uncle is the reason that all these guys died. They said if he hadn't opened the windows, then the missile wouldn't come inside and we would have our children right now. And I thought, who is more right? They're right because they really did lose their children. Is it less correct than saying that he was a hero? For them, he's the villain.
Mm-hmm. Just to pick on that, so I like the relation in Lair between Raimondo and Nofar. At a certain moment they have a discussion about, and Raimondo accuses her for the kind of lie that she has been perpetrating and that she is living in, because she says, yeah, what you do is a lie that hurts, but my lie, she is a false testimony of concentration camps. So she just has been stolen the life and the witnessing of her a friend who died. And she says, but my lie, with my lie, I don't hurt anyone. It doesn't hurt. Everyone wins. Is that something that we would say, or that is said in Israel? Because here, I think if someone is seen as a false survivor of concentration camps, I think it would have some consequences. So it would hurt. It would hurt the survivors. So how would you?
I will first say that Raymond's story in the novel echoes very differently, I think, in Europe than in Israel. First of all, because in Israel there is no such thing as the Holocaust denial. You don't have people saying that it didn't happen. You don't have people who can take this story and say, you see, she's making it up, so it didn't actually happen. The second reason is that Raymond, for those of you who haven't read the novel, Raymond is a Jew of Moroccan origin, of Eastern origin. And when those Jews came to Israel, this is the history, they suffered from discrimination when Israel was founded. They suffered from, let's say, medium amount of racism. They were put in transit camps instead of getting a house, while the Ashkenazi Jews, the Jews that came from Europe, usually got a house. Jews that came from Morocco usually were put on transit camps with like tents. And they stayed there for quite a long time, and they suffered a lot of racism when they were appealing for work. So if you would send your CV and your name was Zuckerman, and you sent the same CV, but your name was Amsalem, Zuckerman would get a phone call and Amsalem wouldn't get a phone call. And for years, this discrimination was silenced in Israel. Today, it's very discussed. But 10 years ago, people still said that there was no discrimination. And we're Jews, we can't discriminate other Jews. So Raymond is pretending, she's from Eastern origin, she's pretending to be a Holocaust survivor, which she's not. But while pretending to be a Holocaust survivor, she's telling the story of her real traumatic immigration. So she's using a terrible lie, but underneath this lie, she puts the real story of a trauma that was silenced for many, many years in Israel. And for me, it was very interesting, the idea that on the one thing, she's doing a terrible thing, but on the other way, sometimes the lie is the only way that she has to yell her truth out.
But that's the case for Nofar also. So her lie is a way to put into a frame her own humiliation, her frustration, her trauma. Is that always the case for you, that the lie has to make the expression of a trauma possible, of a frustration, of a lack of recognition, etc.?
I will say something with a, how do you say, kochavit, no? Like a little dot that you put. On the one hand, I think, yeah, quite often, not always, that's the kochavit, but quite often a lie is used to do something with trauma. I'll give you an example. I work in a mental health hospital at the youth department as a clinical psychologist. And when you look at a psychosis, and I'm not talking about choosing to lie, psychosis is when somebody is truly, truly believing, he's not lying to us, he's truly believing in what he's saying. But when you look at a psychotic person who believes that something happened and it didn't happen, like a patient that talks as if his mother is still alive, even though the mother is dead and we all know that he is dead, but in the psychosis, the mother is still alive. You can say, okay, he's a wacko, or you could say, but let's listen. That's always the discussion we have with the psychiatrist, because the doctors of the medicine say, okay, he's not balanced, you know, neurons and dopamine, and the guys from the psychology department, we say, okay, dopamine, okay. But why this psychosis? He could have so many different psychotics. Why this one? Okay? Even a psychotic mind chooses the psychotic. And the psychosis tells us something about the ultimate pain. It tells us that the loss of the mother was so unbearable that it was easier to the mind to undo reality than to undo the mother. And if you give medicines, it can help, but you will lose this thing that can cure for the bigger way. Now to the little kochavit. I think it's tricky if we say that this is always the case. I think if we just try to understand and understand and understand, we might fall into this. Sometimes I don't like the way psychology influences everyday life. When people say, yeah, I cheated on my husband, but you know, I have this trauma since I was a little girl. Or I beaten my kids, but I have this trauma since I was a little boy. I feel a trauma, it's not always an excuse to do whatever you want to other people.
Well, I found this, there was this, I felt a certain ambiguity about, so you said earlier, you shouldn't, I don't want to write a manifesto, a moral manifesto. But then when it came to why a lie is problematic, which is of course in the novel, there's many reasons, there's many places where it becomes problematic. But when characters explicitly talk about it, you seem to be very ambiguous. On the one hand, it's clear that if it's a harmless lie, it's fine. It hurts nobody. Zeev in One Night Markovitch, who eats a pomegranate, he compares it to little seeds of the fruit. And as he takes a handful of it, he says, look, Markovitch who did a terrible thing, these are small, sweet little sins, not the ones like yours where they get stuck in the throat and you just choke on them. You cannot vomit them out or swallow them. Same thing in liar. If a lie is inconsequential, it seems to be fine. So it seems to be justified or condemnable by its consequences when it comes to these passages. But then in the case of Bella, and this connects to something that you said about people needing a myth. Bella, she of course falls in love with a poet whom she never seen, just because she read a poem that was published of him in a newspaper, which she always kept with her. And then when she visits the poet, she's extremely disappointed. Actually, she ends up in a worse place than she was before, it seems. And then you write, I want to quote this because it's important for me. All of a sudden, she related to those words of the poet as falsehoods, so lies. And then you say these words of the poet were nothing but round soap bubbles, like the ones that rose from the water when Bella washed the poet's laundry in the sink. Lovely, colorful bubbles that your body wants to cradle itself in, but they burst immediately in a spray of water, leaving behind only dirty socks and shirts that had to be scrubbed with soap. And here it seems that something else is going on, because this lie, in this case, the poet's words, but also a myth in a significant way, is ultimately precisely a lie by its nature, because it's nothing. It's like a bubble that can just spring open, all of a sudden crack, and everything is gone. And it doesn't have the substantiality that the truth has. So without considering it in moral terms, would you say that you seem to be unsure about I say it's ambiguous because your writing doesn't make it clear why the lie is a problem. Is it because of the harmful consequences? Or is it because it actually is, whatever it composes is so fragile and is contaminated by nothing? And if that is the case, then also a myth that we need is basically as fragile as a bubble. And what happens when the bubble bursts and the truth comes up again? Could you comment on that?
It's a really interesting question, because I think sometimes when people get out of love, they feel like they've been lied to. This person presented himself as this and that, but he's actually this and this. And it's a really good question of, have we been lied to actively, like somebody deceived us? Or is it that the story that once, this veil of love that we had, the veil is gone. The person is still the same person, but we don't have this veil, this Photoshop, and the Photoshop was inside our own head. It's the things that we told ourselves in order to keep this relationship. It's not necessarily the things that this person told it. It's the way we choose to look at the facts or look at his actions. But I will say something about the huge achievement of a lie from the perspective of a psychologist and cognitive psychology. When you look at a child, and a child is 5 years old, and he still never told a lie, you're beginning to get worried. As a psychologist, no, I'm not laughing. If the child is 6, 7, 8, still never told a lie, I'm beginning to get worried. Do you know what I'm worried about? Okay, don't study psychology here, sorry. The thing is that in order to lie, I need the cognitive ability to understand that what's going on inside my mind and what's going on inside your mind is not the same thing. And this is a very big development in cognitive psychology, okay? The kids that are incapable of lying, okay, are quite often the kids that we treat which are on the autistic spectrum. Okay, because they don't have the capacity to imagine the world through the eyes of the others. There's a very basic test that we do. It's called the Sally-Ann paradigm. I have 2 dolls, and I show you the 2 dolls. And this is Sally, this is Anne. They both play with this. Then Anne puts the cup here, and she goes away. Sally takes the cup, and she puts it here. Now Anne comes back. Where will Anne look for the cup? Now, if you tell me that Anne will look for the cup here, then it means that you're incapable of understanding that Sally did something that Anne doesn't know about, that Sally can deceive Anne. You don't have the cognitive complexity, okay? So the thing is that as a mother and as a psychologist, I sometimes look at patients and I'm dying to get a lie out of them, because this would mean a psychological achievement, a truly psychological achievement. I'm saying that because I think we have this double standard about lies, where on the one hand we all hate liars. Okay, if you catch someone in a lie, it's terrible. If I tell you that my friend is a liar, you ask me, why is she your friend? But on the other hand, we all lie on daily basics. The statistics are that we all lie once a day. It's
As a
afternoon.
creative process.
I think, like every person here in the room, don't want to offend anyone, but every person here in the room, since it's almost the afternoon, the chances are that each one of us told at least one lie today.
Yes, but those are incidental lies. It's something else to build a world made of lies.
Maybe they're incidentals like atoms are incidentals, meaning it's a little piece, but piece and piece and piece and piece, and together it creates the social embroidery which is our life. Like maybe we really use it as the basic material, as the basic founding material.
I would like to come back on two elements in your book that strike me. The first one is the presence of the animals. There is a huge fauna in your books. There are references when you describe time. There is time described as anaconda. There are the hippopotamus is the truth, the little pigs are the lies, and moreover it's funny that there is a distinction between the Dutch translation and the English translation, since the last chapter referring to the pigs has been disappeared in the English one. And just one question, or two questions. So the first one is, why all these animals? So is it because of reference kind of primitive, instinctive life in human being that you want to refer to? And the second one, totally different, is what's the role of the deaf-mute in Liar? So because he made me think of the beggar in Hitchcock. So he's the one, he doesn't say anything, or no one wants to listen to him, but he knows the truth and he has the truth, but he's silent. And when he speaks, they start a little bit to hesitate, but finally they even, I mean, Dorrit sent him back, sent him away. So these two questions.
I never thought about the animals as the primitive instinct. It's very interesting. Maybe it's true. I never thought about it. It's just, it happened. I have no intelligent answer because it's like an intuitive writing. But I don't know, this is the way I look at the world, I assume.
Yeah, they really should, someone should make a whole category and description of all the animals in your novels. It's really, there are wolves, lions, dog, Rottweiler, little pigs, hippos, owls, anacondas, the cats.
I will say about the hippo that I was walking for a long time with this experience of that sometimes the truth can run you over like a hippopotamus in an amok run, you know, and they're like, and I was, but this is, it's not like I'm looking for a metaphor. I had this feeling, like a few times in my life, when somebody said something that was very truthful, and I felt like, wow, I just had a hippopotamus of truth walking all over me. So I think it came from there.
Can you say something about the deaf-mute?
The deaf-mute? The deaf-mute is, there was a guy next to our cafe in Tel Aviv that was a deaf-mute, and each time we would bring him money, and then one day my partner came home and said, you know, he's not really mute. And I said, what? He said, he's not really mute. He's mute for 8 hours a day when he's collecting the money, and then he's talking, and I said, no way. And he said, yeah, I listened to him mumbling to himself at the bus station by the end of the day. He's pretending. And I said, maybe he's not pretending. If you're saying that he's mumbling, maybe he started standing there, and just to write that his death wasn't enough, so he also wrote that he is mute, and then people started giving him money, and then he couldn't talk for all the day because they give him money, they pay him for being mute, and then because nobody cares about him and nobody talks to him and nobody stops, then he forgot how to talk. And I have this experience that it happens to us, that something that the way we present ourselves, like we can be very cynical because we think it's cool, and then all our friends say to us, you're the cynical guy, and we create a role, and then we cannot escape this role anymore. We're stuck there. Even if we want to get out of it, we don't know how not to be the cynical guy, or how not to be the emotional, or how not, and we get trapped in our own image.
And why is he saying at certain moments, little pigs on the beach?
I thought that he's the only one that sees things as they really are, but nobody cares and nobody sees. I mean, what if this is the one person that truly sees the city as it is, but the city doesn't give a damn?
There was something else that, because in reaction to what Ayelet says, so there was a sentence we talked about this afternoon that you refer to. You seem to suggest that there are people who benefit from lies and people who benefit from the truth. I would like to know who benefits from the truth. Who remains? You say, I have the quote here, who are so strict about sticking to the truth, and also they benefit from it. Who are they?
Liars.
These are the real imposters, maybe.
I must say that I think in therapy sometimes when there's a moment of truth, it's like really, it can feel like a miracle. If there's a lie that I've been telling to myself for so long and suddenly I'm able to let go of this lie and to face things as they are and I don't need this lie anymore, it's quite amazing when it happens.
Yes, but that's different than someone who remains faithful to a true idea. So someone who has the power to get rid of a lie and to leave the lie, etc., to get out of the lie, and someone who never lies, who really remains strict to truth, faithful, kind of Jansenist of truth.
Okay, you met this guy? Or?
No,
Okay.
I think it's like a mythology, but you refer
Maybe
to
it's
them.
the Pope that we didn't...
I think he lies continually.
I can't imagine. I need to believe that there are people... I think I need this belief that there are
that's the
people that don't
story-
need this.
That's the story of Molière. I forgot the title. So the incarnation of Pascal and the Jansenist, who never lies. The misanthrope. Sorry, he hates everyone because
this comes
everyone
back
is
to the
lying.
question of...
Everyone is lying, except he. So he can't stand false feelings, fake feelings. He can't stand fake. So for that reason, he has no social life anymore. So would that be the example of someone who really likes the truth?
I think when I think about some of my autistic patients and the troubles they have in social life, it's partly because of that. Because if they come in they can come into my room and tell me, this room doesn't smell good today.
I would like to, maybe, because we will have to stop, maybe to stop with one quotation, because there is something that you continuously refer to in your novels, is a relation mother-daughter, mother-child, certainly the last one, also in Liar. And there is a beautiful passage that, if you allow me, I would like to quote, because it says something about the proximity and the distance between a mother and a child, and the intimacy and also the perplexity, as you say in the last novel, not to know his own child. And it's very well described here. And my question will be, after just a quotation, is I have the impression that here what brings the mother and the daughter together is the suspicion. The suspicion that the mother has, also in the other novel, suspicion that the mother has that maybe her daughter has a secret, that she's lying, etc. And that brings them together, I have the impression. I don't know if that's an idea that you wanted to suggest in the novel, but this is the passage, just a very beautiful passage where you say, you carry a child inside your body, and after she comes out, you still carry her in your heart. And your daughter doesn't know that she was once inside your body. She knows, of course, but not really. She will never know exactly what it was like when she was inside, and what it was like when she emerged. Because when it comes to those things, people are as stupid as goats. You know her body better than she does, because you nursed it, and you diaperated, and stroked it when it hurt, And when she grew up, you watched over her even when she already needed a bra. You know her body better than she does, but you don't know her. You ask, how are you? And she replies, oh, I'm fine. And every fine is another small door slammed in your face. Beautiful. You sit and wait like a beggar at the door. Maybe your daughter will be kind enough to open it and toss out a coin. And gradually you understand your daughter is a stranger. Can you comment on that?
Being a mother of a little girl and being the daughter of a mother, I think this is one of the things that I will never understand. No matter how much I write about it, I write it in order to try and understand it, and I still don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get the idea that I was once inside the body of someone, and I don't get the idea that somebody was inside my body and came out. And I think when you truly get it, perhaps all the tensions and the fighting and everything stops for one moment. And then you get back to your life and to the everyday thing of why didn't you call me and where are you? And I think this is quite incredible. And when I think about my own mother, she passed away a year ago, but only after I became a mother myself that I truly understood what it was for her to see me going away the way I did. And it wasn't something very dramatic. But once, when I was a girl, she was the center of my universe. And then I grew up, and she became this annoying woman that wants me to come to dinner every Shabbat dinner and is angry at me when I don't answer her. And I didn't understand it until I became a mother myself. And now I'm the center of my little girl's universe. And in 8 years, she's going to fire me and not answer my phone calls. And it's going to be the biggest heartbreak that I will ever experience. No man will break my heart the way she's going to do it. I broke my mother's heart this way, and this is how it is. It's terrible and beautiful at the same time.
Are you preparing this
I don't think you
through your novels? It once will happen, and I wrote it down, so maybe it shelters me a bit.
I think I'm going to pay you money for this analysis.
Do you have any question? Yes, Dirk.
We should give up the microphone because it's recorded.
You are right, of course, to emphasize that a child, when it is 5 or 6 or 7 years old, should be able to lie. It should be able to imagine the world differently from what it is. And if a child is not able to do that, then, as you say, there may be something wrong with that child. But I am amazed by the way in which you seem to sympathize with lying. The easygoing way in which you deal with lying. I'm amazed by it because, if I may say so, Jews have suffered from lies for centuries. The persecution of Jews for centuries was based on lies. And it seems to me that, how long have we been talking? For an hour and a half. That problem has not been dealt with. The abominable danger of lies, widespread lies that poison a society or a civilization.
It's a fascinating comment because we just discussed it today in lunch. The question not just of the lie, but the recipient of the lie. What do I mean by that? Were Jews prosecuted because of lies? Were we prosecuted because people really believed that we murdered a Christian boy and drank his blood? Or did the lie come after the hate to justify the hate? Did Leni Riefenstahl, the one who did the propaganda for Adolf Hitler, is such a brilliant liar that she could turn the Germans into murderers to kill 6 million Jews? Or could it be that also without the lies of Leni Riefenstahl, it could still happen? That the hate was there before the lies and that the propaganda came later. And I feel that sometimes we tell ourselves a story later on to justify what we are going to do. But this is my notion.
Maybe, but that still leaves the question, or that's, you still have the problem, or the
sorry.
lies were part of it.
Lies were part of it, but when you think, we just discussed it today, I don't think that Jews were murdered because of blood labels. Of course, I'm against blood labels. If I need to say it up front, yeah, I'm definitely against blood labels. But I think Jews were prosecuted, and I'm sad to say it, because as human beings, we are very good. If you have 3 kids, then it will be 2 and 1. If you have 4 kids, it will be 3 and 1. We have a group and we hate the other, and we're unlucky to be the other. And I think this was before the lying. The lying went on top of that, of our need to feel united as a group and to hate the other. And I think this is something very fundamental in the mankind, and that the lies came after that. That's my opinion.
Hello. I wanted to ask about a little bit if you have any insights or stories about the more the phenomenology of lying, like how it is to inhabit a lie. So I jotted out these 2 words. You've been talking about, in a certain sense, about place, the country, borders, what we inhabit, escaping. You use those metaphors, and I was wondering about, there's a sense of avoidance in a lie, like a topophilia, like you don't want to be, or you want to be in a place, but at the same time like a topophobia, where you don't want to be. So I wanted to know if you have more stories about what it is like to inhabit a lie, to be in the lie, within a lie.
I think it's interesting because when we try, I'll talk from the psychology perspective for a moment, we can differentiate between a psychopath, for instance, and a person who is not a psychopath by the question of, will my pulse go faster when I'm lying? Will I feel shaky? Will I feel ashamed? Will I feel embarrassed? Or will I feel awakened? Will I feel aroused even, in a way? And some of the psychopaths have this feeling of being aroused by lying, because there's this something that I know. But think about, because every people have a bit of, I know something that you don't. Do you do it here with this music? Okay, I know something that you don't. It feels this sadistic pleasure of what I know and you don't. And this bit of sadistic pleasure that normal people experience, the psychopaths have in a much wider way. Like, I feel alive and independent because there's a gap. This gap is what makes me different than you and independent of you.
Maybe one last question, because we have then the reception. We have to,
Thank you. I really enjoyed reading your book, Liar. That's the only one I've read. And also really hearing some of your motivations or inspirations for doing that. So on the one hand, this story about the woman who accused this Sudanese refugee and then was found out to be a liar and labeled a psychopath, and you don't want to see it so black and white. And then also your reflection on, should I be writing this kind of novel at this, at this point of time, because it might feed the trope of these stories about sexual harassment being just made up for attention or some of that. And in view of that, I started to think about 2 choices, and I'm wondering if it's really choices that you made in the novel. And one is that the lie, we never hear the lie. I think, if I remember correctly. So the first time she's being asked, did he touch you, she only no far cries, and it's considered to be an affirmation, but she doesn't say it. Then she's in the TV studio, and you describe how glowingly she tells her story, but we don't hear the story, we don't hear the lie. And I think the same thing with the police report. So I was wondering, on the one hand, if that was a choice and why, that we don't hear the lie. On the other hand, and it seems to be in contrast with that, is I'm surprised after hearing everything about the title, liar. She's not a liar in the general sense. She's not someone who lies all the time, at least not based on the story. She also didn't make it up out of nothing. Like, he really violated her. He really harassed her with his words. And most of the story, she's struggling with the fact that she feels like she's a liar. So then to put the label of a liar as the title of the novel strikes me also as I'm wondering if it's a choice and why you made that choice.
First, you're an excellent reader, and you're right. I intentionally did not tell the story of what is it that exactly she's saying. And the reason is that it's, in a way, it's like lying to the reader. Why? Because I know that if I would write a paragraph of what she's saying, which is completely not true, because they wouldn't put the man in prison just because she cried when they asked if she touched her. She told things which are completely not true. She repeated those things in the police, and she repeated them again afterwards. And I knew that if we will read exactly what she said again and again and again, we would feel very uncomfortable. We might not like her so much. That's also why she's a teenager, while in reality the woman was not a teenager. She's under the age of to be... So these are manipulations that I did as an author to make you care for my character. Because if I said she's not 16, she's 20, and she didn't just sob, but I will really describe to you exactly the false accusation that she said, you might not feel for her so much. And then you might not ask the second question. Because the truth is, and this is where I go from what I think when you write literature, you shouldn't be judgmental, but I think when you close the novel, you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, what was that? What did this person just try to do to me in this novel? And take a step backwards. And I think here is where I do identify with your point. Eventually, there's an objective fact. And the objective fact is that this girl said something that did not happen, and that this something almost put an innocent man in prison. She is a liar. And I feel sometimes when I'm with my patients or when I'm with my characters and I try to see the world from their perspective and I try to understand them I might stay inside that bubble and lose my ability at the end of the day to come back and make a moral judgment. The same moral judgment I hate when I'm reading the novel, I try to do when I get out of the novel. This is my job as a reader, okay? Not as the author, as the reader. And I think with the title, for me, it was this ambivalency. She is a liar, that's the objective fact. Now we're going to try to understand her. But hey, objective facts are still here, and she is a liar. And I think with this complexity, I try to do both.
Thank you. Thank you for the interesting conversation. And thank you for your presence. I just want to make you attend to the fact that the bookshop Bucharest made it possible to buy I think it's the last novel, and also some copies of